Finding chaos's truth behind joy's mirror. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about a sort of a new approach to selfhood, or how we as human beings are going through a sort of data processing filter. That we human beings are not just here to see phenomena, we are also an interaction with the phenomena to change it. That means if you think of human attention as a sort of chemical, and everything in the world that can be engaged as another chemical, with your engagement with any activity, anything, there's a sort of chemical reaction, which means a transformation of different interacting states. Now, on some level, the human being wants to understand what's going on, so it wants to look what it's looking. It wants to look at what it's standing under, and what we're standing under is really too big to index. That means it's very hard to find an accurate theory that explains everything, especially in a changing world. You know. What the idea of the title implies is that chaos's truth tends to be its origin. So it's in some sense saying that without order, chaos has no identity. Without chaos, order has no identity, doesn't know what to identify with, doesn't even know what the value is. So chaos's truth would be the witnessing of chaos, and behind joy's mirror is a suggestion that there is a greater order once you confront the suffering. Excuse me. There's a very lovely quote, incredible quote. I think it's one of the best quotes written ever. But the quote is from Rabindranath Tagore, and he says, let me see if I can remember it exactly. He says, let me find it exactly. There we go. Beauty, I had a version of it in my head. I'm going to read you the accurate one, though. So Rabindranath Tagore, this Indian polymath who even Einstein went to visit, he says, beauty is truth's smile when she beholds her own face in a perfect mirror. Guys, I remember reading this quote a few years ago, and it didn't take a while, maybe it took like a minute, like for it to settle in, and then different experiences added more dimensions to it. But beauty is truth's smile when she beholds her own face in a perfect mirror. Beauty is truth's smile. Truth is smiling because there is no falsity. That means beauty is when you're being, and when you notice your being in the reflection of the phenomenology that you see in the world. And this is a very deep question, guys, because on some level, yeah, I mean, you can give solipsists their corner in this universe. And what that means is it's in some sense kind of like in the lines of mystical thought, that the solipsists felt that they were only in their world, as if their inner realm exists, nothing else. That means a solipsist would only have imaginary friends. So there is a level of contentment with form and space that one can find. And with that contentment with the form and space, there arises a new space for activity. I can tell you pretty much all human beings that a sort of code of language enters their mind. They get some sort of temporarily arbitrary kind of purpose, and then they move on. And so it's kind of like wondering who is alive when the constitution of the states of, like, even the brain chemistry changes. That means it's not like the brain is in one way the whole time. The brain is active in different ways. So our relationship with a static portrait kind of image-like view of the world is not too clear. It's too dynamic for our our slow interpretation. A lot of life, I feel, is not just accumulating information, it is processing the information. That means when one looks at what is happening, when person A communicates to person B, and let's say person B communicates to person C, or person A communicates to B and C, what we see is model projection. We're projecting vision vocally. So that means in the realm of language, the world can always be stretched. It's malleable. We can say language is the externalization of our inner realms. Analysis is the externalization of our inner realms. Movement is an externalization of our inner realms. That means, you know how many days I've sat and given these talks and I've wondered, all right, who's talking right now? Who's talking? When can I discriminate between the inseparability of the individual activity with the cosmic activity? When? When will I notice that everything is happening at once? And that I am my own containment in the void? When that realization comes, it hits you hard. It hits you hard because usually most people, they're holding on to ideology, you know, just like a person would hold on to, you know, like a pole in a bus when the bus is moving. Many of us are holding to imagery that is not us as us in order to be something in the world. And so yes, the world does require a certain illusion so it can ask about truth. That means, believe it or not, in a society that everything was true 24/7, we might get bored. We might suddenly be like, yo man, let's get some illusions in this utopia. This utopia is boring. You know, and so what that means is after some point there comes an effort for the new. And I feel when you, like, imagine right now you're afraid of something as a person. Whether it's a shape, a form, an outcome, a potential, whatever. There's fear. You know, fear is a citizen of the civilization. We have to, believe it or not, respect it. That means when you say freedom of speech, if a human being is scared, that means their own freedom to perceive things has reached that point. We have to attempt to find joy's mirror, and then we'll get access to chaos's truth. And then the human being will reach an attributeless field-like state where right now you feel your potential is dictated already. You know? There's many people who there's many people who I can say in a monotheistic context they feel life is predestined. And I was like, this could be a messed up justification for violence where the person thinks that they don't have to be responsible for anything because the seed was planted before they were born. You know? I feel that's not the case. I feel that every civilization, it has a certain threshold, evolutionary threshold to cross. For our species, that threshold was physical. We physically became separate creatures walking on the earth. We were the earth and we're like, all right, time to walk on myself, you know, and we started walking on ourselves. the earth began walking on the earth. Now this earth suddenly noticed the sky. And for me, I thought that the architecture of the psychology of the human being is very similar to the cosmological, astronomical position of the world. That means the same way the person feels they are an identity in a potential space of many identities is the same way we're feeling we're on a rock in the middle of space among many pebbles that are floating. So what I'm telling you is that the world we see is echoing in our inner realms, and the free will allows the inner realms to echo into the outer realms. Right now that I'm speaking to you, it's the inner realm. Something prior to me even needing to relocate or physically move, there's a vision translating as much as it can in form. That means what when somebody wants to build something, first the idea emerges. You write down the idea, nice. You made the idea more real. Then what do? Then you take a step. So it's in some sense a suggestion that we are multidimensional builders. That we are building the dimensions of our greater perception. And so that's the thing, because if right now we were all connected, let's say this was a time in history where all our heads were connected to the internet, at that point, no human life would be lost. You know what that means? That means at that point, speech will become, the moment we connect all our heads to computers, will be a moment where speech will become obsolete. Language will become unnecessary because the minds have united. Pretty much like drops in an ocean don't need to be separate drops anymore. They are the ocean. So the moment we connect our heads to computers, imagine all your imagination is backed up on some advanced hard drive in the future. Or the cloud or something. It's fascinating. Right now, we have to do the kind of dirty work, or let's say we got to be a bit more primitive. Like in the future, imagine every person's imagination is stored. Right now, the content from your imagination that finds its way to the internet is the content you communicate. That means, do you know how many, like, imagine I hadn't given these talks, and imagine how all these thoughts would still be existent in my mind. I just hadn't vocalized them. So, welcome Aziz and Kimberly to the chat section. Kimberly says sometimes it's hard to live in two worlds, but it gets lonely. And Aziz says looking through glasses. Yeah, loneliness is its own world. Loneliness is when you're here to work with the cosmos and your mind, not with the mind of others. But there will be times where you could be around others and still feel lonely. You could not be around others and not feel lonely. Honestly, it has to do with how your attention is projecting you. What does that mean? That means you ask someone, how are you doing? The person's like, I'm not doing too well, man. Then you ask them like a week later, how are you doing? The guy's like, I'm great. And then you're like, okay, what? It's like the environment is changing their mind. We have to learn to discriminate between what we are putting in the moment and being an effort for, and what is already put in the moment. In my youth, I remember I didn't care enough for problems to, in some sense, attempt my own intelligence. It took me I don't want to say it took me a while, but you see, when you think something is being done for you, you don't do it yourself. And loneliness is a strange gift. And I wouldn't call it loneliness, I've called it cosmic solitude. That means loneliness also suggests an inability to be with others. But solitude suggests a conscious decision not to be around others. Excuse me, guys, my throat's a bit. Do you know how many moments in my life I felt a loneliness because the environment was asking me to change and I just knew who I was, so I didn't change? Do you know how many moments in life you have to begin actually looking with not with just the eyes of your body, with the eyes of your mind? And this is something that has to be taught. You know why? Because the human intelligence is under the impression that it's bestowed with greatness. You know, the biggest thing about it was also a revelation in regards to business I got, you know, that in this life, what comes to you, what remains with you, is because of the work you have done. So imagine on some level, everything you have done, it's being checked. It's being considered by the cosmos. Now imagine, in regards to physicality, only a certain range of it is being acknowledged by you. You know what that means? That means imagine like 8 billion people are building this giant Lego civilization, and you have opened your eyes and you're here to put a bunch of pieces. You don't see the end result, you don't see the beginning of it, but you see where you have become a participant in life. And any being that suddenly you come to your conscious wakefulness, you pretty much wake up as a creature, as a self-aware living being, you are in some sense here to work with life. You can, if you don't do your work, it's like, of course life doesn't have a purpose. If I don't use a hammer to put nails on the wall and put pictures up, the hammer, of course it doesn't have a purpose. It's the hand that uses the tool that gives the tool the purpose. The tool cannot give itself the purpose. And I have found that equivalent in the sense that Rumi, this poet, says that we're all the kind of, I mean, I'm translating, but he says we're like the flute that the universe uses to express itself, express its melody. So what does that mean? That means man is not just an instrument for his use. Man is also an instrument for cosmic expression. And we don't know that much about the mind. And the species is lying to itself. Let me tell you why. Because from one angle, we're trying to advance a materialistic society, but from another angle, that the meaning we see in that materialistic society is immaterial. So these words that I'm saying, can somebody grab these words in the air? No. They're just sounds. They're just expressions. They are animate attempts of nature to itself. Do you know? So you're going to realize all those people seeking enlightenment, meditation, higher states of consciousness. I'll never forget it, guys. I went to India, Rishikesh, and he's a good friend. There was one of my yoga teachers. His name is Vimal, and he's a very, 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 he's not conscious. He's a guy who's not really conscious of his personality, but very conscious of every other dimension of his life. Do you know? And I remember when I was there. Just a second, guys. Let me see. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, Vimal. He had a very, of course, he was born in India. He was a very, kind-hearted person. He was same as my age, and I'll never forget when he would give these yoga sessions. He would say, "Consciousness, consciousness." He would say it like that, you know. And it's like I don't know, something about the way he would say consciousness and how the New Age community sees the consciousness is kind of linked in my life. I saw a pattern there. But the thing is that really, it's like, what are you updating? That means if you can't drive a bicycle, why are you attempting to drive a car? If you can't handle a smaller vehicle, why are everybody's trying to run to the bigger? You know? Life is kind of like this. Everybody has a plate. There's a certain amount of food given on that plate compared to where you are born in the world. Now, some people, they're humble. They see the food, they see what's given, and they just live the life. It doesn't have to be too intellectually superior, and it doesn't have to be too emotionally unstable. It's just an activity that naturally you conduct. It has better benefits. So imagine everybody's plate is full with some intelligence, but we're still seeking higher intelligence, higher intelligence. I am telling you, we're reaching a point where the inner technologies need to advance, and if they don't, the external technology will devour us. Simply said. That means you give a child, a dangerous object, and if the child doesn't have the proper subject to access that object, that child might misuse the object. That means it's not just important for someone to telling someone what a phone is, it's also important to explain its utility. And so what I noticed happening in traditional mysticism was that it's like people are saying the importance of enlightenment, but they're not saying why. That means it's like you see so many people, you're like, hey man, you want to get enlightened? And the guy's like, yeah, I want to get enlightened. The guy's like, yeah, I want to get enlightened, And then imagine you ask him, why? And the person's like, why? Why? Hey man, because it's the ultimate. You see, we are trying to escape our lives by finding something better, only to realize that we had to improve from where we were, not escape it. There's a quote by Rabindranath Tagore I'm going to share with you right now, another one. He says, those who think to reach God by running away from the world, when and where do they expect to meet Him? We're reaching Him here in this very spot, now at this very moment. That means the show is on now. The afterlife is now. The before your life is now. Your past life, your future life, your whatever direction of however way you like to sculpt time like clay, it's now. Now, right now, in this moment is the significance. That means most people are trying to find an ideological way of kind of like as if they're like realities like a Rubik's Cube of language, and if we can move these pieces in the right parts, it's like if the language just finds a certain order, suddenly there's revelation. No. When we realize we invented language, we're going to laugh. It's going to be, I call it the apocalypse of the educational system. That means people went to their professors and they're like, professor. And the professor's like, yes, student. And the student is like, professor, what are you teaching? And the professor's like, I'm teaching you the most advanced, the most up-to-date information, But then the student asks again, what are you teaching though? And you realize we open our eyes in a world of information. Academia is just teaching you classification. That means I will tell you an academic just has a more sophisticated classification of the phenomena. And their inner realms have just been colored in. For some people, they perceive so many. Do you know how many geniuses that are working as construction workers in the world? And they don't even realize it. You know how many Goodwill Hunting stories we have in the world? And the issue is because civilization is not giving a value. It's like civilization should have a transaction for the skill of the human being. Right now, it's not the skill. We don't care about skill. You know what that means? That means it's like that busy Wall Street guy may suddenly see a kid do a backflip and be like, oh, nice. And then suddenly go on and never think about that again. You know? We don't care about skill because we don't want a skillful civilization because we can't fathom it. So the challenge in advancing civilization is attempting as a global community to design some early prototype blueprint of the next grand civilization. So, for example, Civilization 2.0 that I speak about in a lot of my talks, that's when I looked at this world and I'm like, all right, let's say I was just writing for my child in the future, my grandkids in the future, the children of my children's children. Let's say if they wanted to know what my strategy would be, is that if we are in the box, we can't advance it. How can you open the box from inside? If there's no if it's taped in from the outside. You got to break through the box or you got to open it. We have to open our minds from beliefs that in some sense could never be our mind. And I will tell you guys, truth, as Rabindranath Tagore, I remember he says, truth reveals itself in beauty. In beauty. I am telling you, just revert to a simpler self wherever you are that's having karmic turbulence. Just revert to your simpler, decent self and watch life. And you will suddenly see why the karma is tapping you on the shoulder. Karma is never hurting the person. Karma is your blind spot. If you don't pay attention to it, your vehicle, your karma gets hit. you know? So, welcome to the chat, Ivan. So, Ivan, observant question. Chaos is truth. So, I said it in the beginning. I said chaos is truth is where it came from. Just like how when we look at, for example, any person's truths, it's not from just them. It's from how their mind has attempted to be their environment to comprehend it. Yes. Okay, guys. So I'm reading the chat section. Guys, I'm just reading the chat section. Yeah, guys, here's the thing. Traditional spirituality wants you to find truth. Modern spirituality, I think you have to create it. I am speaking in an infusion of the Eastern and Western Enlightenment. You know? So that's the thing. That's the thing I feel it's missing. What's missing is not instructions not being followed from the past. What's being missing is new systems are developing and people are observing them like past systems. And I feel, believe it or not, there is so much more information in the world than we can access. That means it's not that it's like people's intelligence is limited. It's just that there's a limited interpretation of the intelligence, And that's a huge point. That's a very big point. That the limitation could be created. Do you know how many people I've spoken to in this lifetime where they feel the person knows their past life? I had even one person, this girl, approach me and tell me I know you from a past life, and I was like, sure you do. So what I'm saying is, listen, the human being, just like castaway situation, the mind is cast away into its own isolation. You got to start building. You got to start surviving in your inner realms. Most people who wait for the savior. Oh, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for the savior to come to you to tell you to do it yourself. You know, it's like a person sitting on a chair and he's like, where is my savior? Please, someone get me off this chair. Where's my direction? Where's my life purpose? Come on, please. God, send a sign. Send an angel. Get someone to get me. And imagine God, like so many people come to help you and they're like, all right, man, give me your hand. I'm going to pull you off the chair. And you're like, I can't do this, you know? And you see, you have sat on an idea that you're not willing to experientially look beyond. So this is why when I use language, I don't have a strict. I'm not trying to extract to truth. Like I'm not holding language's collar and pushing it against the wall. And it's like, where's my truth language? Where's my money? Where's the truth? You know. So language is a technology. It's a brush. When you realize it's a brush, the only purpose is to be drawn. Is it not? That means, don't you move as a being? So your mind also moves. Now, consciousness is the luxury, is the privilege we have now. Consciousness is like, for so many years, you couldn't choose. Nature would choose it for you. Your ecosystem would dictate the range of your responses. Now, we have, as the human being, moved to an ecosystem where we have built the ecosystem. It wasn't just the world moving us. Now we're moving ourselves, and even behind our eyes, moving the value and meaning of the world. Oh man, that's jokes. So guys, I'm going to share something Ivan said. Ivan said, when people say that, I say, yeah, I remember you owe me 50 gold coins, you know. It's like you knew the guy from medieval times. You're like, hey man, you remember how 20,000 years ago you owed me, like, you know, a bag of coins, you know? Oh man, that's silly. That's so silly. But it doesn't mean that our memory is limited to the colors of just this lifetime. You know, it's just that the question just becomes deeper. You know how Socrates says, the only truth is to know that you know nothing. So guess what? The more you know about potential ways that existence has experienced itself, it is the wind between the branches of space and time. We are the eyes that echo as if they were never here, but journeying through here. You know, that Christ had a very interesting sentence or statement. He said, he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. This comes to us from Christianity. And also that to be in the world, but not of it. That sentence is a multidimensional sentence. And so I feel we can't comprehend religion even if we wanted to, because the discrimination between the separation of the inner realms and outer realms didn't exist back in the day. What that means is they had wilder imaginations, but less discrimination of what was imagined and what was real. We are kind of creatures in the middle of nowhere who kind of realize, all right, we have an advantage. For me, science is the smartest thing that consciousness and traveling through a space-time continuum can do, because it means it's stabilizing. Science is like making sure our feet are on the surfboard. The surfboard, like that means the scientific endeavor is, in some sense, like a species has developed language. Mathematics is a language also. And so we are trying to comprehend, we're trying to explain in a limited domain of experience, the limitless, in other words. And we're eventually going to realize, without night, there is no day. So there is no fixed solution you can find that's either good or bad in a dualistic system. That means as long as you're entity using language, your truth is going to be stretched between two worlds. And this is where I deviate. I even deviate. For example, my father, my brother, they perceive it differently. I walk in a, I'm kind of, I walk in a school of thought. Like my own school of thought is that it's not a personality. I don't see myself as a transmigrating soul. I see that transmigrating soul as an activity in the presence of the unknown. For me, if somebody says, what is the evolution of language? I will tell you it's to the remembrance that the unknown is moving knowledge. So you know what that means? That means everything you know is an attempt at sight. And moments I've been joyous, I can tell you, there was a time where win lose was joyous. That modality where beating, like sports. I would play a lot of sports in my youth, and I was very competitive. I was a fast runner, and I was a striker in football games, soccer, and I at that point I hadn't even understood the value of teamwork. I was thinking like this. Like, I can get the ball, I can shoot a goal, I can dribble these people because I'm faster than them. Why do I need to pass? And I would just dribble, dribble, dribble and score, you know? And there was a sort of feeling where I even would dribble the goalkeeper, and you see that moment where you've kicked the ball even past the goalkeeper. That means the goalkeeper that had access to four limbs couldn't even get the ball from you, and even though the ball rolls into the goal, but it still goes in. Like, I can tell you, for me, speech is like the various different ways you can kick a soccer ball. So when I give these talks, it's like I put a concept in front of me, and then I get ready to, hit it so the concept hits the corner of the sidebar and goes in the net in a way where the goalkeeper can never catch it. I think the smartest thing that goalkeepers should do is shout. The goalkeeper should shout at the angry goalkeepers. Probably save. They need to save. Like, there's more miss. It's like this goalkeeper's success was in shouting. There was this unique goalkeeper, I forget his name, but in soccer, he's famously known for the scorpion save. There's this next level goalkeeper where this goalkeeper would get the ball and just run towards the goal and score. He's the goalkeeper that in his career scored like 52 goals or something. The goalkeeper, you know? And it would be that situation where imagine you're like, all right, you're like, come on, man, pass. And then you're like, wait a minute, is that the goalkeeper? Who's in net? And you're diving to hit this header that the goalkeeper, imagine, has kicked the ball in there, for you. I feel the meaning of civilization is similar to that. It's pretty much institutions are playing soccer. Wherever the ball is, they're looking at it. And it seems like money is that soccer ball in the future. Or not in the future, but just I'm saying, like, when I remember myself back then, I can totally see how money is the thing I'm kicking around now. I'm looking for, and not money, I'm saying survival in advanced ways. So when the win-lose mindset goes away, I'll tell you this, I was in New York, I had a chance to go into investment banking. Like, literally, I met this person, and I spoke to them, and the guy liked my personality, and he wanted to mentor me into, the guy was a financial advisor, very sophisticated financial advisor, right? And the way the guy found me was because it was in this university event, and this guy from this company had come, right? And I remember that this guy, there was a lineup of kids with suits and the most polished resumes all waiting in line, and I just had a t-shirt on, right? And I'm like, all right. And I was like, the whole point of all these people being in line was they were dressed well and they had the finest resume to leave an impression on this guy. And I'm like, it's kind of like that Men in Black situation where Will Smith was smart enough to use the table. So I'm like, why are all these guys standing in line? Why not just go talk to the guy and leave an impression that way? So all these people are in line, so I just go straight there and I'm like, sir, can I ask you a question really quick? And when you say that, the person wants to talk. And then I spoke to the person and I asked them what your philosophy on business is, and then I quickly told them my philosophy. And I told them that win-win makes sense, and I asked them, when you work, what is it that those above you want, right? And when I asked that question, this guy was like, holy shit, this kid is considering what those people who are above me want from me. That's like one of those people to have on your team that is also aware of your blind spots so they can take care of you, you know? And so I remember asking this guy a question, and there's this lineup of maybe 20 people with suits, but I've asked the question, and this guy goes on explaining, and then the guy halfway realizes he's speaking for 10 minutes and people are waiting. He smiles and he tells me, what's your name? And he gives me his card and he's like, contact me whenever you can, you know? And it was like as if, I'm telling you, especially in business, it's all a kind of chess of impressions. That means people are not only aware, it's like a battlefield, like the soldier in the battlefield. Imagine you're a general and you're like, march, soldiers, run in, like some intense battle situation immediately. Now imagine there's a warrior in the battlefield. He's like, I don't like how heavy the sword is in my hand. And then the general looks at him, it's like, buddy, you're about to die. It's like, don't worry about the weight of the sword in your hand. Worry about the weight of not existing, And then it becomes, do you see what I mean? That means some things in life, it is their importance that makes you see something about it that others aren't seeing, and you walk that way. This is, I find, an incredible approach. So, welcome, John, to the chat section. Um, Guys, let me just say something. I should probably write this in the about section of the description, but I'll tell you this. The way I use these talks is my background is Persian, and in my youth I've always had this sense of just like in the New Year's we open up this book from a random page of this poetry collection of these mystic poets and we read it. Okay, so my relationship is that sometimes anytime I get a sense of the thought of my own talks comes into my mind, I just look at the time. Like right now, I'm looking at the time, it says 7:04 p.m. So I would go type in MW704, you know? So that's the way I use the talks, and because I've heard my voice my whole life, when I hear my talks, I just hear the concepts. I don't really pay attention too much in how I'm saying it. Maybe others are paying attention to my tonality because it may be a new communication for your ears. But for me, when I hear it, it's conceptual. So I would say a way to listen to these talks is just playing it and just wondering if what the sequences of the concepts, you know? Guys, the art of war applies to everything because it's the balance between heaven and earth. that the general who sees that balance first wins in the battlefield. That's pretty much what Sun Tzu was getting at. That means Sun Tzu's Art of War was written at a times where the gods were not dead yet. You see, the god, it's like back in the day, the gods had faces, you know? They had profiles, avatars. Then it became more of like a quality of the universal sector. And then you find that more in, Oriental philosophy. Um, Novelty. Is it not the best an introduction into the unknown? It is. Novelty is the key. That means many solutions to a person's life can't be found from their past. They have to be created. That means the problem is the external realm, the solution is the inner realm. Because where else does the solution come from? Where else does the answer come from? What I'm noticing is that we have to revert to a simpler version of acknowledging ourselves as beings. Then we have a newfound space to acknowledge a new complexity. Sorry guys, this thing was on mute. Sometimes that happens. Um, I was just saying, some people, their nature is chaotic, they act nice. Some people, their nature is nice, they act chaotic. And it's simply because the person is intimidated in the moment by what they can be. So what that means is it's like a warrior that has a skill with the sword suddenly finding a warrior that has much more skill with the sword. Then the warrior, in some sense, doesn't want to see himself similar as the other, because sometimes when you see unity, it means your individualism is not there. So I feel that after some point, the person will suddenly look back on themselves and realize what the unnecessary was. When they realize that, that becomes a subtle regret. You see, one thing I was kind of being concerned that, imagine you took a human being and you gave him the most advanced abilities. That human being, at the end of that, is still left to their worldview. And if the worldview of the human being doesn't update, they will still bite. So it doesn't matter if the creature has longer fangs, it will still bite. If it doesn't have fangs or it has fangs. That means, like I'm telling you guys, Jordan Peterson even made this point, that this life is a jungle. But it's a jungle where civilization is being built on top. So it doesn't mean that the natural is always graceful or gentle. And anger is not just, I'll tell you, I've tried to kind of hold myself sometimes back. What I do is I instantly try to get out of the room when I get angry, And let me tell you why. Because if you get angry at something you're looking deeply at, you don't try to break the surface. That means words can be used like a spear, or they can be used like a shield. And I think it's clear, because sometimes you can just tell when someone doesn't care. That discretion, that ability to realize that someone is still in their inner realms when they speak to you is, let me tell you, rudeness, cruelty, violence, inner realm blockades. That means when a person is suddenly rude, angry, or violent, it's equivalent to that person in the downtown of some city shouting at buildings like a madman. It's equivalent to that. You know why? Because that person doesn't discriminate between the authorization, the rights of their inner realms and the rights of the inner realms of others. When you don't care for the inner realms of others, language automatically becomes a weapon you're hurting people with. If you care for the inner realms of others, then language automatically, it's like your intention sets the quality of what's found in your attention as a being. Anyways, Socrates was such a badass. In court, he's like, I have modern enemies and ancient enemies. And the court's like, what do you mean? And Socrates is that there are some things that I resisted in other times. So what that means is, imagine a sort of temporary joy, and imagine a temporary order. Now imagine an eternal order. Then imagine a temporary chaos, and imagine an eternal chaos. Okay? And it's kind of like this, guys. Have you seen a cornered animal before? In my youth, when we would go to my cottage, we would, there were, of course, dogs for the garden. It was a big garden, and there were dogs there, right? And I remember something messed up that the people had done was, like, they had cut Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I'm back now. These live streams are more flexible, guys. There was a time where I would just upload the talk where I'm eventually going to go. This live stream phase is probably going to be maybe like a couple more days that I'm going to go into this kind of fasting of silence, you know. But anyways, I don't know, guys. Human nature is something phenomenal to observe and to realize that most people don't have your eyes, so they are actually commenting on their own eyes, you know. You can only trust. So welcome to the chat, John Free. I feel that trust comes through experience. That means belief, you can't trust it. Belief, you don't know. Imagine there's an elephant behind you. Let's say a blue elephant is behind you, okay? Or a pink elephant is behind you. And then we look at you and we see somebody, you don't see the elephant, you only see the person in front of you. And the person in front of you is like, hey man, there's a blue elephant behind you. And you could be like, oh man, I believe this, I can believe this or I cannot believe it, the belief doesn't get you closer. Only turning your head and seeing what's behind you gets you closer. So I am telling you, trust that is sold to you, that is not trust. Trust is your inner realms feeling comfortable enough to externalize. That means if I don't trust a sense of self, how can I speak? Who is speaking? If I don't trust my physical body, how can I move? So if you notice, you have trust on so many micro level things. When you go get a cup from the cupboard to get a cup of water from the tap, it's one of those things where it's like, how can I tell you? Did you plan for years? Did you go to school for years to be able to move that cup? No, it was an instantaneous certainty because you knew what you were experiencing, right? But when it comes to the mind, we in some sense are realizing we in some sense don't have, our language has limits to really seeing what's going on with the mind. That means it's like we are at the pioneer stage of the most important phase in the evolution of language. That means right now we are like a tribe that's hunter gathering and bringing, like back in the day, the hunter, let's say a hunter gatherer went out and suddenly saw like berries. Then the guy came back to the tribe and it's like, yo, everybody, there's berries here. And the tribe was like, no way, berries. And the technology of berries suddenly was accessible. Everybody was getting berries, you know, like blueberries or something. So you see, that was a hunter-gathering approach of the outer realms. Now I'm saying the same thing is happening, but for our inner realms, and we have maybe like 50 years before AI comes and does that. So right now, we are like, the wheel has been invented, or let me say it, we are or let me say it like this. I will tell you, it's more like a journey. So, John, I would say it's more like a journey. The only way I would believe the world to be in a certain way if we were living inside a painting. But we're not living inside a painting. We're living inside a film. That means the frames change. When you wake up every day, that's like a new frame in the film of your life, you know? There was a very important kind of There was this politician, they asked him, how are you so good at negotiating? You know what he said? And negotiation is an advanced level of communication. It's multidimensional win-win, pretty much. That means two inner realms are trying to find the best outcome. I am telling you, I did try to attempt life in regards to my inner realms to solve it like a Rubik's Cube. Which means you endlessly try it until you find a working algorithm. And the importance of the question really makes you remember the answer of it. I remember more things that evoked emotions in me. I feel personally as a being like in every room I would enter, I wouldn't see anything extra. I would just feel, and that feeling would kind of be a distinction between what is me, like how I am separating myself from the world, and how, in some sense, the other is how some other being has separated themselves from the world. When Jordan Peterson says, "Your rights are my rights," he was shouting this in one lecture, he means that your eyes, because it's like when you realize you're an opportunity of sight and you realize other human beings are an opportunity of sight, and you kind of see we're all tourists in this plane of existence for a little while, you're like, yo man, civilization should just make the tourists experience manifestation better. The tourists in manifestation, higher quality experience. So right now, the civilization is acting like a statue. It's something where the citizen looks at, but the civilization doesn't see the person. It sees, of course, people. I mean, people are involved in society. But I'm saying, like, there are, in any system, institutionalized system, that institution is defining itself based on walls. Because there's walls, there are those outside of the walls. So the system, as long as something becomes too defined, it can't encompass all definitions. So that's why, if you notice in these talks, I am kind of piloting between the spectrum. It's like I notice something chaotic, I'm like, all right, I see the chaos. Then I wonder how that chaos can move, and I see the order. And that wonder how the order can move, and I see the chaos. And so eventually I've noticed that human existence is an oscillation between the unconscious and the conscious. That means every time you blink, you're your unconscious mind holding your knowledge. Every time your eyes open, you are the known holding the unknown, giving the meaning to the unknown. That means who has fans and haters in deep sleep? You know, who has a role in deep sleep? What can you do in deep sleep? Not even a dream. In deep sleep, what can you do? You are just being. Do you see how simple it is? Do you see how imageless it is? Do you see how inner imagery has come and gone? You know, imagine right now you're standing in two rooms. One of those rooms is your mind. And anytime you have a thought, it's as if as you're standing in that room, suddenly an image entered the room. So when you become microsensitive, hypersensitive to how image is becoming meaningful language for you, you'll understand that after some point there was a value given and accepted process that happened. That means you did something, and that's why you're this. It's the primordial event before the named entity wonders about the world through stories. So I'm gonna ask the audience what they're interested. I'm gonna kind of create three options here. Let's see. So, out of curiosity, I want to know which one of the viewers would be more interested in which one of the options. All right, guys. So, thanks for responding. We'll go with sci-fi. Let me see. Let me see how we can. I can tell you a chapter where, in some sense, chaos is truth behind joy's mirror. Yeah, I'll tell you this next level chapter. Okay. The science fiction novel I've worked on, just to recap for those who are listening, it's set in the year 5025. The world is divided between the traditionalists and the futurists. The futurists are all the people and all the beings in society which they feel they're eternal. And the traditionalists are those beings in history and civilization that are still entertaining linear time. And because the civilization in the year 5025 has access to, I've pretty much given myself full freedom. Pretty much all the extreme ideas that I felt maybe like, uh, you know, was better to kind of write in a science fiction context, I've shared. When you look at history, you get a sense of what's been spoken about, and you kind of get a sense of, where the edge of the Shire is. But science fiction gives you a freedom of your inner realms. So when I'm sharing something from science fiction, it still is rooted in my experience, but at the same time, it is more malleable than when we speak about now or reality. So there's a different state. When I speak about the present, there's a different significance to the science fiction context. So, in other words, listen to these ideas more in a more entertaining way. I guess. The futurists among them include robots. Robots are temporary beings. They consider themselves being part present as an eternal AI. So robots are futurists in the story. We have, for example, extraterrestrial beings, and even the United Nations at that point has a galactic sector. And there's aliens speaking about how aliens are being treated and problems that aliens are having, and the right for the planet Earth to build unique environments for aliens because some alien immigrants to Earth in the year 5025, they can't exist in the ecosystem of Earth, but they still want to live in Earth, right? So in the UN, there's speeches like that. And then in the UN, you would say what would be another traditionalist if robots and aliens, certain aliens feel they're eternal, or certain there's even acknowledgement in the science fiction novel of space having minds. So certain beings in the story communicate, just have conversations with oversouls. The souls of planets and whatnot are in discussion with one another. Like the whole book starts from the main character, the soul. He starts in a dream. The whole book starts in his dream, and in his dream, Rasul hears, he's just hearing galaxies speak to him. Galaxies. So he's hearing, for example, a voice to the Andromeda galaxy and then different galaxies, And as he's hearing the voices of these galaxies, he suddenly wakes up and this is the first chapter, his girlfriend, Galactica, which is this beautiful blonde girl who's blind, but in the scene, in the way I wrote the chapter, she's like naked and she has like her bag and her purse is like hover purses back in that then. So right now we carry our equipment. In the future, our equipment's just gonna follow us in the air, in the way I've imagined it in this novel. So she's pretty much like everything is kind of, the technology is so advanced, equipment, that you don't know, even the room technology is advanced then, you know. And guys, into the way I've seen the evolution of interior design of buildings, that's a talk that I'm just preparing. I'm preparing for one day to kind of like definitely give that talk on an evolution of the inner environment of the buildings we live in, geometrical evolution of them. But anyways, so Galactica comes in the room and says, I don't remember exactly the word, was something like, did you hear them again? Something like this. And Rasul says, yeah, I think this is, it's going to be my last time in my human form. So Rasul is like telling his girlfriend, I might just not exist as a physical being anymore. And then Galactica leaves Galactica. She is like, she is like, she's blind, but she is so conscious. She sees everything, And her father was one of the people who kind of inspired the a galactic sector in the United Nations. So she's like literally like as powerful as a political. She's like a politician, a very powerful politician, but at the same time she's like this next level seer in the story. So anyways, the chapter I want to share, or I'll just say it to you, in case if you've heard it, even it'll sound new to you. There is a woman, this liberated sage, not Galactica. This is like, imagine a new chapter I'm telling you. She gets this vision that she has to climb this mountain, which is like this cold mountain, She gets the inner vision. The universe tells her you have to climb this mountain. She starts climbing, and her name was Adiyogi Rinpoche. Adiyogi is from the Vedic tradition, and Rinpoche is from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And her name is Adiyogi Rinpoche, but it's spelled with ones and zeros instead of I's and O's, And I'll tell you that why it's spelled that way later. But anyways, this sage gets this vision. She has to climb this mountain. She starts climbing this mountain, and she's climbing with the assurance of the intuition. So she's climbing the mountain. The mountain is cold and snow, but she's not caring for that. Nothing is happening to her either. She's just climbing. She's trusting her intuition. She climbs the mountain, this cold mountain, through these tough conditions. And she realizes at the top of this mountain where there was this blizzard, there is a dimension into a flat desert. So imagine climbing and getting to a mountain peak, and then that at the top of that mountain peak, there's a dimension. There's a desert, this dry, sunny desert. She enters the desert. Her intuition tells her, walk to the center of the desert. Now she sits cross-legged in the center of the desert, and she was like freezing before. Now she is in some sense dying in the heat. It's like went from the opposites, right? So she entered this hidden dimension of a flat desert wasteland at the top of the mountain. Now I gotta pause the story so far, and I gotta tell you something about Rasul, the main character. Rasul, in the beginning of the book, it actually goes for a pleasant walk and goes to what is Central Square, New York, in the future, though. Wall Street has become like a divine. Right now, Wall Street is like the most corrupt place. In the year 5025, it's like a say, it's like temple level relic. Like, there's so many. I remember, man, I should one day I think dedicate a YouTube channel just to science fiction. But anyways, Rasul, he sits down, he starts walking to the pure lands of his inner realms. That means it's like he's technically doing Mahasamadhi at the beginning of the book, which means consciously leaving your body. So he as if he heard galaxies in his dreams say something, and then he's like, all right, time's up. So he's going in by a river and kind of like trying to consciously leave his reality. He suddenly gets a memory of his father that pulls him back to reality. And then suddenly, from that chapter, he gets a message, and then he goes to meet his childhood friend, which is this robot, but this robot is like a shaman. Okay, the robot's name is Justikar Nova. The robot is like a tribe, like a Native American uh, uh, shaman. That means it's like the most natural spirit. You can say this robot is like, its appearance feels like a robot that's conscious of the spirit of nature, you know? Justikar Nova. Anyways, so Justikar Nova calls Rasul and says to Rasul that I've got a vision, like from his inner program, you know? And that Rasul needs to help Justikar Nova, who's now like he's pretty much the ambassador of all the robotic realms. Like all the robots. So I gotta say something I probably should have mentioned. Robots are doing all the things human beings now are doing. Human beings in this novel have reached a sort of elevated, enlightened state. So many robots can't even see humans in their program. They walk past humans, but they can't see humans. Right? It's as if we are like angels in another dimension, to them. But some robots, like the rich billionaire robots or certain mystical robots like Justica Nova, they have access to humans. They can communicate to humans. They can even see humans, you know? And so Justicar Nova calls Rasul and he's like, and look at now, why does Justicar Nova need Rasul's help? Justicar Nova, he's realized there was this programmer, prodigy programmer, and this prodigy programmer created a video game, virtual reality game, a program called HH. And HH is, in other words, heaven and hell. And this programmer, this genius programmer, prodigy programmer, he made a simulation of Dante's Inferno, the heaven and hell, that we see, the 7 levels of heaven and 7 levels of hell. And many human beings were trapped in this simulation. That means so many people on the planet, human beings, were trapped in living cyber lives, and Justicar Nova had to get Rasul's help to find Dante. To find Dante, this programmer. This crazy programmer which made HH, a program that's so many human beings are just lost in heaven and hell, but it's a cyberspace kind of simulation. So Justicar Nova is trying to do something that's bringing justice, to this illusion. Like a robot better than any human being understands what it's like to be in a simulation, you know? It's like human beings talking to robots about simulations. The robot would be like, the AI would be like, buddy, relax, I know. I know it's all a simulation. You know, I'm telling you, there's a reason I've connected mysticism to technology because it's going to echo its patterns in the cyberspace culture. So they have to find this programmer Dante. Now, what happens is this chapter I'm telling you, I'm actually telling you a chapter and then telling you some part of the chapter I haven't told you. Not, it's like the next chapter where I'm going to tell you what happens there. So, um, Rasul finds himself going to this very strange mountain, which is a sacred divine mountain. And they called it the mountain, I call that chapter the mountain, uh, the, what was it? The ocean on the mountain peak. Yeah, the ocean on the mountain peak, you know, something like that. And so it's this pretty much, I imagine lava, like that's pretty common. You see lava coming out, but you never see a whirlpool, ocean like whirlpool inside a volcano and having that whirlpool hole like going to the center, right? So the ocean on the mountain peak is literally like, imagine a volcano, but when you reach the top, it's like a whirlpool of water, random water that's there, you know? So Justicar Nova calls Rasul and they're going on this journey. They're climbing the mountain. And Rasul's like, what's up and all this? And Justicar Nova is telling him why they're there. And Justicar Nova, he's a robot. He says he says that it's like it's been kind of scanned that Dante has hidden in this mountain. He's found a way to enter the mountain, and then Justicar Nova is telling Rasul the history of it, and only one person other than Dante has entered this mountain. Nobody else has entered this mountain other than this one person. Do you know? And that one person is Adiyogi Rinpoche. That's why it's spelled with ones and zeros, because Justicar Nova is telling Rasul. Justicar Nova tells him there was this divine program, female program, Adiyogi Rinpoche who entered the mountain or something. So only Adiyogi Rinpoche has entered the mountain, and in all of history, no one has entered that mountain because the mountain chooses who it allows to enter. And Dante, the mountain had strangely chosen what some people saw as a criminal in the cyberspace realms, a cyberspace criminal, you know. He was like wanted by the world and the enlightened society, not just the enlightened society, but the world's much different than, I can't, it's kind of hard speaking about the future from the past, You find moments that don't exist yet, words that don't exist yet, or experiences that are not named yet. But anyways, they get to the top of the mountain. Now, before I tell you what Rasul and Justicar Nova do, I'm going to tell you what happened to Adiyogi Rinpoche when she was sitting in that desert after the universe told her. All right, guys, I'm going to finish the chapter really quickly then, okay? I just saw the chat section. Sometimes I make it full screen and I talk, and sometimes when there's these big gaps, it's because it's like the mute thing. Like there was a clicking issue. So, all right, I'll sum it up. So many people are saying 3. Okay, guys, long story short. No, this part's important. I'll tell you this part. I think even if you don't care for it, I think it's interesting to know. Adiyogi Rinpoche is in this desert dimension that has appeared at the top of this mountain. She's gone into the center of it. Legend has it, as I write in the book, that she sits there for 300 years. But she experiences that 300 years in her inner realms as 3 minutes. And after 300 years, or I don't know if it was 3,000, I think it was 300, I don't know. After 300 years, then it's as if she opens her eyes, her thirst is gone, and from underneath her, that whole desert becomes a whirlpool, and suddenly it becomes the mountain, the ocean on the mountain peak. So and then Adiyogi Rinpoche, she's just hovering there, she goes through the whirlpool hole. Anyways, Rasul goes and does the same, and that's when the next chapter begins. So I'll get back to the talk, guys. Pretty much, even in the science fiction novel, you can see examples where Dante is like chaos. He simulated a program of chaos. And chaos's truth was chaos's programmer. If you notice, it's like we want a sort of stability and gentleness in our outer realms, but we need a sort of excitement and a bit of chaos in our inner realms. And I find that like it's kind of like the yin yang symbol, where your outer realms are like the white part, and there's a bit of darkness in it, and your inner realms are like the dark part with a bit of light in it. Or you can see it vice versa, like you can flip it around. What I'm saying is that when I close my eyes, it's more subjective phenomena I'm observing, but that subjective phenomena, this might be strange, but I think creativity actually comes from the world into the self. And the deeper observance of the world, I think it leads you to a witnessing presence. And that witnessing presence is its own freedom. So when you come to judge things, you see it's easy to judge actions. It's easy to say, don't do that, that's wrong. Okay, do that, that's right. It's easy to judge that, but you can't judge being. You can't judge how something is being. Have you noticed? A new self has to mean something new about the world is being perceived. If you are a human being that sees something happen in a new way, how can you be the same self? So it's like this strange situation where our outer realms are moving slower than our inner realms, and our inner realms, because they're moving faster than our outer realms, they can deviate and change the outer realm. So that means when my mind can see this coffee cup in front of me, and then literally imagine like Photoshop, we copy pasted, I imagine a copy pasted version of this same cup right beside it. Okay? So I would see in that moment that that's cup that is imposed, the inner realms, the cup is somewhere but not here. And that makes me feel that we're looking at our life from a higher dimension and we're conducting it simultaneously. I feel the ears make us feel like our soul is in space. I think our voice makes us feel our soul is matter. Now, matter has mattered since time immemorial, has it not? There was a time where it was like, you know how many people in history have died because of the Inquisition and heresy? Do you know how many people have died because their communication didn't meet what the world wanted to see? And that is the failure of a civilization. Freedom is the only sign that we're evolving. But freedom will ultimately ask itself, how is it that I am free, but how is it that I am not free to choose? So you see, behind your eyes, nothing can touch you, enslave you. Nothing can touch awareness because you can't even touch it. It's just awareness is like the space of being, and matter is what's happening in this space. So when Rabindranath Tagore says beauty is truth's smile in a perfect mirror, what that means is truth is looking at a mirror and first realizing there's nothing wrong with the world. There's nothing wrong in the mirror. When there's nothing wrong with the world, how could there be something wrong with the self? Only if you think there's something messed up in the world, you will start acting messed up. Because you have no choice. Literally, it's like from even a design view, subjective. Imagine like if somebody put a person's psychology, like how an architect has a blueprint of the building. Imagine somebody put a blueprint of psychology. You would eventually see that what is the blueprint is how and where, in some sense. How can I tell you? It's the precision of perception and how much it is aware that it is creating the moment and how much of the moment is moving by itself. The reason silence and stillness is important in yoga is because that silence and stillness makes you suddenly notice different rhythms, different movements. You see, we have to find a way to become interested not in just the effect of our lives, but how it's being caused. And when you go to look at how everything's being caused, you find yourself eventually coming to the first point you chose as reference. That means the first letter of the alphabet is the most divine letter. Because it was like the number one that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 could come after. Do you see? And the number one was in all of them, and 0 was the value encompassing, the space of authorization for form. So guys, I'm gonna share something. Anybody who's directing a comment at me, put MW at the beginning, and then I'll respond to it. If there isn't MW, I'll just let the chat be. I think that's better. You know. Anyways, I don't know, guys. It's an interesting time. It's the emergence of a new global community. It's the emergence of a value system that is for the first time realizing just like you can look at an object from different angles, you can look at a subject from different angles. So as long as life is a subject, it can be infinitely stretched. So we can, just like how you can create a cyberspace, you can create a video game where the square feet in that video game is bigger than the building that made the video game. You can see that in some sense it's kind of like it is the rewinding of the Tower of Babylon story, where all humanity was united under one language, and they decided to build a tower that went towards the gods, to the level of the gods, to that reach the clouds where the gods were standing. And this tower, because humanity was united under one language, that meant human beings cared for one common value to be the face. That means you got to choose some letters if you want to speak. You got to choose some words if a person wants to speak. When we treat language like a technology, then we can't. It's like you can't judge the car. You can judge the driver to some degree, but judging the car is never the driver. I was very surprised, guys, in various sales jobs that I've worked throughout the years. I can tell you that none of the employers asked if I cared for their business. Whoever you are who has a business, go to your employees and ask them if they care for the business. And if they say yeah, ask them how. Because I feel the reason so many businesses are inefficient is because they have people who don't really want to be in that business working there. That means they want to be there for survival reasons, not for Alan Watts says work and play reasons. Or they don't care for the evolution of something. If you're working in an institution and you don't care for the evolution, I feel this thing should happen, that if you are a human being who is in a cycle of life where it's very repetitive activity throughout the day, the only way you'll feel refreshing is every day you go to the same activity, but you try to update. There was this story that really was incredible. They said, my father told it to me. It's like this business story that there was this kind of job interview, and the guy's dressed up, and he has his resume in his hand, and he's going for this job. His briefcase in his hand, and he's going for this job interview. The job interview is strangely at this house, and the guy sees one by one people going. He knows that's the place, and people are they go ring the door. There's nobody, and then people go in the back, and he sees one person go in the back, and then it's like the guy not coming out. So he's like, it's all right. It's like maybe that's a job interview. So this guy, as he's going, he goes to ring the doorbell. He sees, for example, the doorbell is broken. Like there's some part of it off. He fixes it. The guy just he's there by the doorbell. He sees something is broken and he just fixes it. He's going by. He sees something else of one part of the building, some part of something on the edge on the ground is off. He fixes that. And as he's going around this place, he's fixing everything that's his moment. He's pretty much living a masterful moment in every moment rather than trying to attain something in the future. That means the person cares for how the presence of phenomena is in the moment. So many people, and eventually the guy fixes a bunch of these things that he sees there's just simply wrong, and he just fixes it. He goes back in and he sees the job interviewers are clapping for him, and he sees all the other job applicants just sitting there, and the guy says, "We choose this." The point is, they end up bringing that guy who was fixing everything in every moment, employing that guy. The others just walked past. They didn't have an alertness. Maybe they had an awareness to what the job required, but they did not have the alertness of that fundamental care of that means if you work for a company, go see how the owner is looking at the company, and then you'll understand what eyes are moving the decisions. Then you see what the captain of the ship wants in whatever employment force you are. So it's like you living in efficient inner realm in every moment, and inevitably one of those moments will catch on. That means, think about it. Instead of so many people are enduring through many things, and some fail, some succeed, but what if the person was trying to do everything mindfully in every moment? That means you observe before you act. So that employee, that person in that job interview, they were all looking from cameras at all the things this guy fixed. They realized this person has an attention to his environment and cares to advance it. Trust me, if you have that quality anywhere, over time, someone will see it. Someone will see this person who's applying effort. Just like that experience I had in that kind of with that financial advisor, recruiter. I did something that was new. Everybody was trying to do what the past did perfectly. And so those people who attempted to do the past perfectly and couldn't, those are some of the people that really reject the new. That means, imagine we take this concept of the inner child from psychology, and that means every person, their emotional range also relates and refers to their memories, their childhood memories. So when somebody comes and tells you something, there is a potential that your mind might remember like your childhood, and the emotion from that memory might suddenly come into you now. You know what I mean? That politician said, I remember I didn't finish the point. That politician, I was telling you, he said you need to have, in some sense, mutual respect, but not mutual trust. That means in any sort of communication between person A and B, they need to have mutual respect, which means they've sat at the same table, you know? And then mutual trust can come later based on the discussions made at that table. This is why it's like what you don't care about, you can't be. What you care about, you tend to be. And care is really attention of being that inspires effort to do. There's a rawness to life. It surpasses every word I've ever said. There's a dynamism to life. It surpasses every static image we've tried to box the world in. We are now moving from the era of language worship to the era of advanced communication, to the era of returning to the multidimensional designer within. The multidimensional designer observes the multidimensionality of design. The multidimensionality of design is the permission for new dimensions. And what that means is, if the future time traveled now, do you know how unaccepting of anything new we would be as a species? You know, and you can totally say, a creature in fear tries to hold on, does extreme impulsive things to hold on, to maintain. It's like they say, when a person is drowning, if you don't know how to properly save them, they can drown you too. That's why lifeguards have a special ability. Because the person, a mind that goes into, like, you know how your phone has airplane mode? Imagine your mind has a freak out mode. When it gets too overwhelmed, it'll stop building itself as a thought, and it will just identify with incidents. So really, on some level, every person that has looked at the concept of reaction in regards to human motivation and psychology, that reaction, we call it reaction, but it's a dimensional response. Do you see that language is kept in duality? Do you see that the only ways you can judge someone is on a spectrum, on literally an axis? All right, good thing, bad thing. For how long? For how long this axis is going to be there? Could this axis, beyond this axis, the world be kept in many ways? Could the multiverse theory be a suggestion of our potential to imagine what universes could be? Could we say that behind our eyes it's a multiverse, in front of our eyes it's just one universe? Do you see? Do you see the complexity that we're left with? It's as if, for me, it's as if like they put 8 billion unique inventions, and now we have to kind of be like, how do they work? You know? We cannot ignore we're social beings. That means we're not influenced by just our mind. But we must have an ability to distinguish what is us and what is other, and where all those relationships arise from. eventually all belief will break down as experience moves. That means sometimes the trust I have in speech is because I see the vision in my inner realms and it's already there. I just have to find words to share it. You see, there was a time in my thinking where it was language first, then image. But when I speak now, I see image first, then language. So I just reversed the process and I realized that speech is painting. You're painting from the silence as the canvas, and every word consciously harbors a hidden joy. That means it doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want, but this mind has different results to itself, of itself, if directed differently. That means literally if you make a totally different decision, let's say you got a piece of paper and you're like, who am I? And you wrote all the qualities that you felt you were being now. Now imagine the opposite of them. Then imagine the spectrum between what is happening, what you are now, and the potential of what could be. And you will see the inner realms can stretch reality. And if they can stretch reality, they become the potential for reality. That means before Edison made the light bulb, it was a potential in his inner realms. Imagine Edison telling his friends, guys, what would you say if I made my own sun? And they'd be like, Edison, get out of here, man. You're not going to make your own sun. He's like, what if there was this glass object that illuminated light like a sun? You know, and his friends were like, get out of here, man. Glass object, illuminated like a sun. You know, what are you talking about, man? You know, his friends are like joking and laughing. The next day, Edison's like, guys, come over, house party, you know. People come to his house and they see these light bulbs. And it's in that moment they see how the potential of the inner realms can revolutionize the outer realms. And this potential of the inner realms, because the civilization is like a fax machine, like this machine-like, it's not conscious. That means it's like, believe it or not, a conscious civilization would be transforming at much quicker speeds. So the speed of change in the systems that administer us dictates how open-minded the people are, or how open-minded the institution is. Some countries in the world, religion and state are separated. Church and state are separated. Some countries, they aren't. They aren't in some countries. And when they aren't, that means regardless of the political observation, there is certain fixed conclusions to ethics. So you can say the modern culture wants an ethics that's like iTunes, it updates, a morality that updates, but in certain schools or certain systems, their morality is declared. As if just like a person says, I'm living here and I'm never moving. You know? It's a declaration. It's literally like that person who doesn't want to get up from the chair, but you're the only one who can. So anyways, we gotta find ways to see things in new ways, pretty much. We gotta give novelty a chance before the past chokes out the potential for it. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And something I gotta say before I end off, when you look at this wallpaper I've chosen, there was a reason I chose it. You see, the tree, imagine this tree had eyes, like it's like branches were its sight. Imagine this tree was conscious. This tree would notice that from that part where it's like in the soil and in the water, it only sees its reflection. Do you see? So imagine if okay, let me say it like this. Like if there was a squirrel on this tree looking down, that squirrel would see its reflection. Okay, or let me say it like this. I gotta connect it to the tree. Imagine if a leaf on a tree became conscious and looked at its reflection in the water, in this one of these trees, imagine, even though none of them have leaves, but you know what I mean. So I'm saying when the tree is outside of the soil, it only has access to its reflection, but its roots are beyond its own perception. So you are more intelligent than you can ever measure in a dimensional way. You know, just because we can't see the roots of the tree doesn't mean everything has to be filtered through one secular lens. This we are uh, lions that are roaring art. That's the mind. The new is valuable. What the new that is aware of the past and is still new is more valuable because it's then all inclusive. It's an integrative selfhood. You are kind of realizing like in front of your eyes, you can have as many teachers as you want. You can see even like in every experience that happens to you as a teacher. But like you can also see that behind your eyes, you are your teacher. Who is there to be something? Every person is left with how their eyes and sight is being present in an instant in this cosmic landscape. So being is instantaneous intelligence. When a person moves, there's a delay. So sometimes if you see me pause, I mean, I'm kind of course, putting myself in front of the microscope of a global audience, my words, but like I'm saying, like when there is something about nature that it performs to its capacity. Then if it goes beyond, it's like overworks itself, and it's kind of like not staying true to itself even. So that means it's being. It's like this is something that maybe it's a lost art, but they called it like Satchit Ananda. When you realize there is an unknown consciousness existing, Satchit Ananda. The consciousness to existence and the unknownness of this, when the person becomes aware, life is blissful. It leads to bliss. That bliss is trust. That means it's like if you don't trust your mind, how can the world trust it? How can you speak? Do you know how and how many I've walked in silence a lot of my life. That's why when I look at words, I see that it's like speech. It's like, because it takes energy, it's like I think the more a person can say, uh, the better. The more of the inner realms are shared. And plus, guys, the mind experiences the entertainment, is it not? We are driven towards entertainment that stretches our experience. But when we realize we're processing that entertainment at some point conceptually, philosophy becomes a, uh, a unique a unique glance at a world where the mystery is not solidified yet. Michelangelo said, I saw the angel in the stone and set it free. You know what that means? This dude saw a giant piece of rock and he's like, okay, I can see I can sculpt an angel looking figure from this chunk of rock. So guess what? You are sculpting your identity by your actions in this biological body. You are seeing a vision of self and then doing that, right? So we are creating not just ourselves, but the world that self is inspired towards. And the human being has to have an ability, I say, to acknowledge 4 dimensions. That means, please tune out of these talks if you're not comfortable with these 4 dimensions. I'm telling you that my talks aren't for you. You got to be comfortable with the 0 dimension. That means space. You got to be comfortable to give enough freedom for space to be space. That means we got to give emptiness a citizenship in our minds. That means don't fear the void. It's just there. Observe it. And when you observe it, you see all that matters moving in. So be comfortable with the zero dimension. That means you're comfortable with the space in the room. Be comfortable with the one dimension. The one dimension is the singular. That means any object around you, any physical thing, anything you see, be able to see that as just all being part of existence, and also have an ability to see it as just itself. That means this cup is just a cup. There's no philosophy needed. I saw it in a singular way. You can see even people. That person is not some transmigrating soul that thinks it's a Buddhist. That person is just a person. Simple, singular. So you found content with the space in the room, then you found content with singular stuff in the room. That is the beginning of dualism. The everything and nothing coin flip. Once you're comfortable with the singular, you open up to the dualistic. So once you're comfortable with anything just being as it is, with dimensions just being as they are, you open up to dualistic perception. You have done this much as a being unconsciously if you are a human being that communicates and uses language. That means if you can drive a car, you have a consciousness that can observe things in a very vast and superior way. The relationship of the movement and the mover and the space where it's being moved. So you confronted the zero dimension, the space in the room. You confronted the one dimension, the singular phenomenon. Then I'm using a simple mathematical language for this. 1 plus 1 is 2. So when the singular observes itself, it feels dualistic. So from the void, then from the singular dimension, from the one dimension, we go to the two dimension. Language is in the two dimension. I am speaking to you right now in the dualistic dimension. That means everything I say you can see as good and bad. And based on your experiences and spectrums, you can judge it in endless ways, and you have the freedom to. Every person should be grateful at any comment they get because it's the mind of another human being moving. It's like, don't you want to see the mind of your species move? So after you have confronted the space in the room, after you have confronted the stuff and the singular stuff in the room, you're now confronting the dualistic. You're confronting good and bad, morality, Now, I'm saying language is an inner technology that's oscillating in this dimension. That means the moment we're not stuff, there's nothing to say. Do you see? So language is in the dualistic dimension. Now, what is above it? I don't say the third dimension. I say infinity. For me, I've kind of simplified it for people as this. The way I call it, the wearing the ring of the absent heaven. The ring, like a ring you put on your finger. So these 4 dimensions I explained to you, they have a circular relationship with each other. That means at the edge of space is infinity. At the edge of infinity is duality. At the edge of duality is the singular. At the edge of the singular is space. At the edge of space is infinity. Do you see? It's the ring of the absent heaven. I've termed it as such. So when you are comfortable with these 4 dimensions, then when a person speaks or anything happens, you don't shift from the observer into savage impulse. And when you maintain that resonance, you'll see the world notices. When I say the world, not people, not civilization. Nature notices. Animals are behave differently around you. There was a time where I was around animals. I was there was such resistance to things being there before. It's like the child when all children are like this. I think they're starting in their own simulation, and they feel that the world should go exactly as what they see. But you will see that the jaded part of life is that you see, no, the world has a life of its own while you're living on it, while you're living here as a thought. But you're never a thought, you're the presence of the field of nature. That means if you ask this tree, who are you, it would say I'm the whole planet. Because where do you draw the line of my separateness? And that's the one of the joys of philosophy, to wonder about potential new dimensions of perception and sight and vision and anything. I feel anything can be added a new dimension. You know what that means? That means anything till the end of time in our inner realms can be updated. You know, you look at a pen, okay, let's say I'm looking at a pen right now, and I'm like, incredible. Maybe in the future, the pens are going to be like lightsabers. They're just going to be lasers. You're holding a laser in your hand, you know? Like the person, you see the idea, and either the concept or its context evolves. And most people, if you care authentically to just literally get a piece of paper and be like, all right, and what would be the concept part of my moment of being? And that's your life story. And then you'd be like, what is the context part of my life? And that's where how you see the world is suggesting who you are. So your direction in life is not just based on how you see yourself, or you see a motivational video of some guy doing, dumbbells and being like, holy shit, I got direction now. It's not like that. It's like you have to study your eyes first, how they are opening, and believe it or not, how they're even closing. Because beauty is an all-encompassing dimension. That means even a chaotic being can see something beautiful, and an ordered being can see something beautiful, but their response to that beauty is different. It's like someone wondered, what is change? And it's like the person said, hey man, God's walking on a treadmill as long as the treadmill is on. you know, the simulation continues. And so I don't know. I see a sort of oscillation of characterhood and identity to, like, you see, Terence McKenna said in Archaic Revival. You know what that means? That means we are reaching a point where we're going to become our own legends rather than having legends. So that means human ability is reaching a point where it's going to express in ways where it has never before. So the ancestors automatically become just silent witness, silent people in the uh, stadium watching the game of now occur. You know. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Remember this idea that the concept and context, you must create the space for its evolution. When fear no longer disturbs you as you're doing work, conscious work, the unconscious gives you a chance to figure it out. When you figure out that the unconscious is the real you, your consciousness gets access to a state where, just like how you see, um, it's like this. It's like the caterpillar has legs to experience a two-dimensional plane, goes through a metamorphosis, and experiences a three-dimensional plane. The caterpillar doesn't know that its evolution is into a butterfly. The butterfly maybe has no memory that it was a caterpillar. Maybe it needs no memory that it was a caterpillar. Maybe it's totally a new being, you know? Or maybe it has access to all the memories of the caterpillar. We don't know. But it's like this situation where I would say that it's like you look at human beings, and right now we're being a self in a world. I feel human metamorphosis, like the caterpillar into the butterfly, would be becoming the world of the self. And I was thinking that the cyberspace culture in the future is going to echo this in some sense, in the sense that if we connected all our heads to one computer, we would be the world creating the selves. If we, so that means right now we're self in a world, we're going to be the world in the self. So it's like this kind of chaotic moment where you see dimensions are peeping into one another. They have sight, they have acknowledgement. You know, I suggest that it's not just people that are intelligent, but dimensions and universes can be intelligent. But their intelligence doesn't mean it's comprehensible to us. It's just a potential. Now that potential can become actualized. I feel we're in a much more multidimensional world than our beliefs can ever shape for us. I feel that the fact that you can do something new means that whatever you think you are now can change. So in a world where everybody can change, who are we judging? Are we judging a changing universe? Or are we witnessing Novelty's masterpiece? The human that spoke to realize that the mind is pure silence. One of the most beautiful mystical ironies. Whereas Rumi would say, silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. And what is silence but an ability for the observance to settle down? Learning to navigate as a pilot of your attention between simplicity and complexity, between stillness and movement, and between silence and noise and sound. If you master this, you become incredibly comfortable with the dimension, not just with where or what you're living with. Your mind realizes that you are aware of it. So many people, their minds are aware of them, but they're not aware of their minds. The era of advanced communication has begun, and beyond language worship, subject worship, our attention shall pilot on. Thanks for listening. Much blessings, and namaste.